Hi, welcome to the TEAS working group at IETF 105. I'm Lou Berger. Von Buren is next to me, and we are lucky enough to actually have Matt Hartley in the room. He's often remote. He really does exist. We always appreciate his help, whether remote or local, and it's great to have him here. Our agenda has been posted. There really hasn't been any significant change that's been posted. We are doing Etherpad as usual. I ask everyone to jump on and help us capture comments that are made at the mic. You don't need to capture everything that's spoken during the slides. That's captured in the slides and the videos, and it's really the discussion that's important to capture in the notes. We are at the IETF, if you didn't notice, which means we have our note well. We have rules that govern our participation and our contribution to the IETF. If you're not familiar with it, please take a look at that URL on the bottom. But basically everything you say here or at any meeting at the IETF, it becomes part of our record. We're streaming, we're recording. Please say your names as you come to the microphone. That's helpful for those who are remote, as well as for when we go back to make sure we have accurate minutes. I am on Jabber, and if anyone else wants to jump on Jabber, that's great, but sometimes I'm not always able to monitor so well as chair. But if anyone has a comment remote, we welcome that, whether you come in through MeetEcho or through Jabber. So moving on to where we are on documents. We have no new RFCs, and we just had one RFC that moved into the RFC editor queue on yesterday. That's the TE topology. That is was a very major piece of work. It's an important piece of work, and we're really happy to see that progressing. We have some other documents that are being that are going through the normal IESG processing. And so it's always good, again, to see the work of the working group heading towards publication. Of course, that's why we're here. We have a couple of newly adopted documents. I believe they are both on the agenda. Okay. We'll go through in a moment any document that's not on the agenda. We have two sessions today. The first one's 1 year in now, so good, you found us. That's excellent. The session information changes between the sessions. In particular, the audio stream will change. Everything else stays the same, including, thankfully, the room. We do have a beverage break for 20 minutes between 3 and 3:20. We do intend to take that break. It is our hope that we can run through our agenda faster than what we have listed, but we also do have this extra long time. We actually more time than we requested, so we'll take advantage of it. We don't have to leave early, but if we leave early, that's also okay. Our agenda is pretty tight, particularly the first session. This is loaded with documents that have been accepted by the working group, as well as the design team activity that we talked about, I believe, at the last meeting, or talked about the last couple of meetings. Our second session will move on to non-adopted work, and we have a little bit of a section on slicing and 5G related activities that I'm sure lots of folks will be interested in, so that's definitely a hot topic. We've had no liaisons or communication since the last meeting. I just realized I meant to go and check errata. I'm not sure if we had any errata that came in, but we should have mentioned that. That's my bad. Pavan says we didn't have any, so we didn't miss anything here. That's good. As usual, just a reminder, we have a formal IPR process that we've adopted in the working group that says we will poll the working group whenever we adopt a document, and again, before we submit for publication, submit to the IESG for publication, we'll poll the working group for disclosures of IPR. We do encourage everyone to use the mailing list. It's a great place for discussion. It's a great place to make sure that your colleagues are in sync with the activity that the progress you've been making on a draft, and it's a great way to report those private conversations that inevitably happen between authors. And that's it for the first. Well, so much for the idea of loading everything up to start. If this doesn't work, we'll switch to the other.
We'll look at the status of working group documents now. This is the set of documents, working group documents that are not on the agenda today. So we'll walk through the status of each of these in the next few slides. First up is the ACT and Young document. No changes since the last IETF. In previous meetings, we agreed that we would wait for the generic TE models to progress to the publication stage and then revisit this. We are not there yet. So in the meantime, if you can get in a few more reviews, that would be very useful. Next is the enhanced VPN document. There was a revision published for this early this month. There was a section added for covering interdomain and interlayer network scenarios. The authors intend to add more details and operational considerations. We do have some work relevant to this coming up in the second session. So this topic would get revisited again. Next is the PCE native IP document. There was a revision published for this in April. This carried primarily some editorial changes. The authors may make a few changes to the document based on how the scenarios document progresses through the publication stage. There was an open question on if and when the status of this needs to be changed. So we would let it stay as is for now and revisit it at a later point in time. Next is the PCCC use cases document. There was a revision published for this in July. There was some text added to state that this is a living document to catalog the various use cases of PCCC and that there is currently no intent from the authors to publish this as an RSC. This point of debate would be revisited at a later point in time when I guess we run out of any more use cases to add. The last revision did contain a new section for beer, the PCCC use case for beer, and the authors do intend to add cover the multicast SR policy use case as well in upcoming revisions. This is the RSVP RMR extensions draft. There was a section added in the new revision covering express links. At this point, the authors are requesting further review and feedback from the working group. So please do give it a read and reach out to the authors on the list if you have any questions or concerns with the approach being taken. Next is the SF-aware topology model. There haven't been any changes to this since the last IETF, but the authors do feel that it's mature enough to warrant a young doctor to take a look at it. So we'll make sure that happens. Next is the long-standing T metric recording draft. At this stage, last year we were on the verge of killing this, but the authors have miraculously turned this around. They did publish a revision yesterday, and as per the authors, there are no more open issues, and they are ready to take it to the last call. I did skim through the document, and seems like all the outstanding comments have been addressed. I would request the working group to do the same and reach out to the authors if there are still any concerns. We do intend to take it to the list pretty soon. Next is the TE service mapping document. Again, no changes since the last time, but there are a few outstanding items from early this year that need to get addressed. The authors have promised that this would be taken care of in the upcoming revisions. Next is the tutorial document that we have for using the T topology and tunnel modeling, tunnel models. This again falls under sort of a living document bucket. There is currently no urgency to take it to the next stage. The authors do have identified a few more scenarios to cover. So please do review them as they come and reach out to the authors if there are any particular scenarios that aren't currently available in the document. The last document in this deck is the path computation data model. There were a few, this seems to be an outdated slide, but yeah, there were some comments that were received on the list from, I believe, Olivier and Julian. There were a couple of use cases that were added, but those did not translate into any Yang model changes. The authors do have a few open issues on the Git that need to get taken care of, and they do believe that this would be ready for a Yang doctor's review before the next IETF. That's all we have in this deck. Let's move on to our first presenter for the day. That would be Tariq.
Click, just say next.
Wait,
Oh, it's
okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Tariq.
Mic is unplugged. Turn the mic on, probably.
Good afternoon, working group. My name is Tariq, and I'll walk you over a quick update over the working group documents on the first slide. So I'll go over the updates from the last time we met. I'll present some open issues, and finally we'll talk about the next steps. Next, please. So the first document is the Yang-TE, which covers the tunnels, LSPs, constructs, and attributes that model on the device as well as on off the device or a controller. Next, please. So the first open issue, this model or this document went through a round of Yang doctors review, and we got recently comments. The authors will be going ahead, and the first feedback we got is it's on the right track, and we will be addressing the comments that we got. Next, please. The second open issue is a discussion that happened on the mailing list. And with regards to a tunnel name collision, tunnels can be configured on the device. They could be configured on the controller. They could be learned or state on the controller, or learned or state on the device itself. And we have an issue where the name of a tunnel that is learned can collide with a tunnel that's configured, either on the device or the controller. And we have a proposal that we discussed on the list, as I mentioned, and we'll go over it on the next slide, please. So, as I was mentioning, the name collision can happen on the controller if the controller learns of tunnels from different devices with the same name. What we had suggested is for learned tunnels or for state tunnels from devices, we will append the ingress ID to the name so that it's unique. So an example is a tunnel R1-foo will be distinguishable from R2-foo, where R1 and R2 are the ingress routers. The second case, an operator can configure a tunnel name matching an automatically created tunnel on the device with the same name. We have to have them distinguishable, so we are proposing a configured prefix. The prefix can take, for example, auto as value or a string, and then we can distinguish, for example, a tunnel auto-bypass link 1 from a tunnel bypass link 1, which is configured. So the one on auto- is auto-created, and the bypass link 1 is configured by the operator. So this is one way we could distinguish in this case. The third case is a controller has a configured tunnel with a name, and then it learns a tunnel with the same name. And what we're suggesting is we append the prefix. The same prefix we are introducing can be configured with a different value on the controller, for example, remote. So in this example on the bottom, I show in remote-R1 foo, remote-R2 foo will be distinguishable from R2-foo, for example, which is configured on the controller. So the gist of the proposal is that we have a prefix and we prepend the name with it, so it becomes distinguishable. Next, please. The next draft is the RSVP model draft. We have 2 modules in it. The model covers the attributes of the RSVP protocol and signaling parameters per session, per neighbor, and per interface. Next, please. So for this draft, it went through a round of doctors' review comments, and we got the feedback and addressed it. So we had some nits to address, edit nits. We had state containers, which was in conflict with NMDA, and we removed that. We had to expand some names of leaves, some pluralization of nouns there as well. We added some normative references for imported modules. Next. The second update, for sessions of RSVP, we had a single list, and we were putting in this list 2 types of sessions, IP RSVP sessions and RSVP TE sessions. The key of these 2 sessions, as defined in 2 RFCs, 2205 and 3209, they're different key. So one suggestion was for the ease of lookup of a session to use the actual real key, native key, that rather than having an index that we need to do a walk to match on the specific session. So the proposal, what we've done is we split into 2 lists, one list for RSVP IP sessions, another list for RSVP TE sessions. And we introduced the native keys for each type of session. Next.
Derek, I didn't note, did you include support for the IPsec RSVP types? The desk port?
The security, the IP security?
Yeah, that's with 2208, 2209. So that.
It doesn't ring my, no.
You might want to double check that this approach works for that.
Okay. Are you hinting that we should, or?
I think you have to support that.
Okay.
Whether or not this actually supports it, I think you might be okay for the session, but the sender template might cause you a problem.
Okay.
But, it's worth double checking.
I'll double check. Thank you. So we added a couple of RPCs with RSVP model, specifically to clear sessions, specific session or all of the sessions. And to clear a RSVP neighbor, we have a hello session established with that neighbor, and we wanted to clear it. Again, it's a specific session or all of the sessions. The notifications, we piggybacked on the publish subscribe model, and we added a section in the draft to talk how we can leverage that. Next, please. With this, the next steps, for the first draft, we've addressed all of the Yang Doctors review comments. We'll go with another round of internal review, but we will be asking soon for working group last call. So we asked the working group if you have anything, for example, now Lou had pointed out the IPsec support. Please raise the issue before we ask for working group last call. The second draft, the TE tunnel modeling, we had, as I mentioned, received some comments from the Yang Doctors review. We will be addressing those, and we will be requesting a working group last call after that. The last 2 documents there, we are going through another round of review for them before calling for a Yang Doctors review. With this, I close my presentation. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, this is Dhruv from Huawei. I have the question regarding the name collision, and especially the first point in the name collision, which was regarding the controller learning the tunnel name from devices which is the same,
Right.
and you using R1, R2. So do you have a little bit more details about where will R1 string will come, and how would you, where is this coming from, R1 exactly, the
That's-
identity of the source as a string, how would you figure it out?
So that's a fair point. So one proposal was to use the source address, which we have already in the model. But we think that, it can be a DNS name or maybe a configurable name of the ingress itself. But so far we said the source address is going to be appended, for example. If you think that's not user-friendly, we should look into a different option.
I'm feeling like, why did we put name as the only key and not put source and name together as a key? That would have
That's
solved this
another-
problem, but maybe it's too late.
That's another, yeah, it's a fair point. So we have one list that contains all the tunnels from all the devices. We could split multiple lists per device, but we wanted the model itself to sit on either a device or the controller. So this is why we took this approach.
So like Tariq said, this problem shows up only if the controller is trying to put everything in the same data store. And the assumption is that the controller knows whom it's getting it from, and it will take the corresponding source ID and prepend it. How you know the source ID? I mean, the assumption is that there is, because you're getting the data out from a particular source, you use that particular source's ID and prepend.
Okay. It's a fair point. Thank you for raising it. Thanks.
So next up, Shubhan.
You tell us.
That's it.
Good afternoon. I'm Xifeng Liu from Water Networks. I'm here to give a quick update to two TE topology model documents. The first one is a layer 3 TE topology model. So this is a working group document. So we have some changes since last revision. This model has some dependencies. There are two other documents we depend on. One is the IETF TE types. Another one is the TE topology. So both dependency models have been changed since last revision. So we updated our model to align with them. Each of those two documents has two modules, so we need to align both of them, all the modules there. Another piece of changes will be trying to resolve young doctors' review comments. This is an ongoing process. We have fixed the editorial errors, and we'll start still discussing the other comments, which is ongoing. So particularly, this is one we need to explain the relationship and the hierarchy of our topology to the related dependencies. We have augmentations, we have leaf revs. So we also imported several types model. So this is need to be resolved. And another issue, this discussion was brought up in last IETF. So it's about performance metrics on the unidirectional link. And the discussion was that usually for the accurate one-way delay measurement, we need clock synchronization, but then on some system, such kind of mechanism is not there. In that case, the system will use a two-way measurement to do the estimate, divided the two-way delay by 2. So in that case, the two-way measurement metric could be used for. So Greg will have more comment on this. Okay. You want to
Okay,
say?
thank you. Greg Mirsky, ZT. Yes, clock synchronization is important for accurate delay measurement. Packet loss measurement and delay variation are not susceptible to clock synchronization.
Right. So, we had a few discussions. We also talked about this during our weekly meetings. So the current approach is that we still keep the two-way matrix values there, and so could be useful depending on the situation, and so that we keep the model as is. So.
Actually, it would be useful if clock synchronization, the question is that how it can be determined. That's an interesting question and problem with the clock synchronization. Quality is sufficient. So it may be the clock synchronization does exist. The quality of the clock synchronization may be not at the level requirement, because there might be some applications, for example, ultra-reliable, low-latency communication in 5G that requires very high quality of clock synchronization. What I want to say is that using two-way measurement to calculate one-way metrics is useful. What's important is that then it has to be specially noted that this one-way metrics is calculated based on two-metric measurement.
Rakesh, you want to say something?
A comment? Rakesh from Cisco. So do you have both one-way and two-way populated, or you only have one or the other?
We have both.
You have both. So in some cases, if you only know one way, then
Right.
you don't have the two-way.
Right. So we just don't use that value.
Okay. Because if you have two-way, then you can divide that by 2, and that could be one way. And that's how you can compute the one way. But you're saying it's one or the other, depending on how the measurement is done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, what I wanted to note is that there have been developed measurement methods, active measurement methods, that provide both one-way and two-way metrics. So, for example, QRAMP and STEM protocols, you can do one-way and two-way measurement.
So hold on there. So right. So back to this modeling, right? So in terms of modeling, do you see any changes need to be added to this?
Actually, it's a very good question. For STEM protocol, it's a simple two-way active measurement protocol. We do have a portion that
We have separately the clock synchronization model separate, right? So we,
we don't have this. Again, as I mentioned, I think that clock synchronization and quality of clock synchronization, it's a separate question, and it's something that I'm not aware of methods to quantify it and how to monitor it, how to measure the quality. For their performance measurement, we can discuss how your model related to STEM-Yang model, which is IETF working group draft.
Right. So please be reminded, this is a TE model. We are not. This is not performance metric, performance measurement model, right? So In terms of TE matrix here, so we are using the TE types. So the groupings there. And if you have something need to be added, that's probably more troublesome because it's already past last call. So, and if it's okay, you can live with this, then we go from
Okay,
here.
I'll take a look then.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that. It's already working group was called, but I think it will be good if model that measurement protocol produces is easy to map into their model that characterizes link performance.
So after that, I think we can move on to the next step. Then the next model is the SR. SR model also augments the layer 3 unicast topology model. And that could be a TE. So in that case, we will inherit from TE. Then after last revision, we also did some changes to align the most recent, the Spring SR-EM model. So we took their latest grouping and used that. We also have this model reviewed by Yang Doctor, and we have fixed some editorial problems. And then now we're still discussing some issues to be resolved. One comment is about the constraints on some of the attributes related to SR. We added those constraints to our model, but we're thinking the better way would be to add those into the grouping we are using from. So this is the SR Spring-Yang model. So we talk to the others after this. So we're trying to see if we can move those changes to the base model. And also there's a discussion about the URI format used at the ID. So this is, we don't have much we can do now because this is the base network topology model which we inherited. So about which kind of format we want to use. Is a URI or we only want to use a string, but it's already there. So we just do whatever we can. And after that, pretty much is, and we'll move to the next step. That's it.
Questions, comments? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up. Ooh.
Hi everyone, this is Dhruv. I will be presenting two presentations. The first one is on the VN Yang. So I think we know that VN is the customer facing Yang model, which reuses lots of things from the T topology and the T tunnel model. The relationship is as shown in the figure. Though nothing has changed here. The main changes in the document is we added in the introduction section details about how this model can be used in the 5G use cases, and this is something that is going to be discussed specifically in the second half of the Ts. You have some topics on 5G, so we also linked it up in the ACT and VN Yang, and we hope that this Yang model can be a basis for virtual network even in the 5G world. Apart from that, the changes were mostly editorial so far, and make some clarifications in our diagram, make the pointers to the JSON examples a little bit clearer so that people who read the model can understand how this model uses the connectivity matrices of the T topology to show the relationship between the VN members. In the Yang model itself, one change was that we were using the LTP without reference. So we changed that. We are now using a reference so that it has to be as configured in the topology model. And apart from that, in the Yang model, we added reference statement to make sure that wherever we are referring a leaf, we have a pointer to a draft or an RFC. So those were the changes. But the main thing is the open questions that were discussed on the list, and we don't have a resolution on that. Maybe the first one is pretty straightforward. It's just a understanding question, but that led to the bigger question, which is, can a VN member be from P to PE? So the concern came from, currently we define VN as a list of VN members, and where a VN member has a source and destination AP, and AP, according to us, is a logical identifier between the CE and a PE. So we always expect the CE, customer facing information, to be a key part of our definition of VN member. But for some use cases, folks are saying that they want to create a virtual network first and then attach the customer facing information later. So set up, for instance, a set of tunnels which are starting from P to P. I'm not attaching customer information now. Let me set up a set of tunnels, and then when I do the customer mapping, I can do the C mapping easier. So the first question is, should we allow this? And if we allow it, what will be the possible ways to do it? And some of the possible solutions that I could think of, we kind of wrote it down, and we had some discussions, but we did not have any resolution. So this is something that we want to work on between this and the next IETF, and hopefully close on this.
This is Qingwu from Huawei. Actually, what you suggest to change the AP, I think it makes sense, but I refer to the figure 12 and figure 14 of the ACTN framework. Actually, they support, for AP, support the customer view and operator view. For the endpoint, it could be the CE and it could be the PE. So we already covered that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why just changing to AP will solve the problem. But I think the bigger problem we should focus on is, can we have a VN member without any customer, with just P to P? So AP is a identifier between CE and PE. You need to have at least some CE information. What we really want, your requirement is, let us have just P to P VN member without having any attached CE. So that requirement we want to drill down a little bit and see how we can solve it. So it's not the matter of what you call L1, L2, whether they are called AP or whether they are called endpoints. I think the main question is, should we allow P to P tunnels as a VN member?
Yeah.
Yeah, you agree that that's the main issue here?
Yeah. For the first issue, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, have I explained the second issue well? Because it's coming from you, maybe I'm misunderstanding. This will be a good time to hash it.
Yeah, for second issue, since you follow the ACTN framework, figure 12, figure 14, you support the customer view and operator view. So you need to distinguish between each other. So how do you do that? Actually, the solution you may propose, you may introduce some indicator, whether it is customer view or is operator view. Another choice is you may introduce additional, maybe we call the node ID, and to support this P2P connectivity.
Yeah, that's maybe the loop back one that I refer to.
Yes.
So you are fine with these solutions, but I think the bigger question to the group would be that what do you think about this requirement first, and then we can further drill down on solutions. Sorry.
So just want to confirm, so when you mentioned the loopback, actually, it is already defined in the model, right? Or you,
You can actually, yes, you can use it as it is without making any change. It's just an identifier. We have done that, for instance, when you configure a VRF, you bind the loopback interface to the VRF. It's just like that. Like usually it is for the customer facing interface, but your loopback interface can also get binded to an VRF. So I'm kind of equating the concept to there. You don't need to change anything. It's just when you don't know the information, bind loopback, later on attach the actual customer interface when you have it. Something like that.
yeah, I don't know which one is the best choice. Just another option, actually, you can introduce some indicator to distinguish whether it is custom view or operator view.
Yeah, that's another solution, that make it clear what is it referring to. Like make it AP can be in between, it could be just C endpoint or it could be a P endpoint. So that's another solution which is coming from you. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you limit your comment to ACTN? Why isn't this a generic comment? Why is it scoped to ACTN?
It's
Nothing in the discussion I heard was specific to a controller-based
Yeah,
model.
no. I think that this model, as I comment on the list, this model should be generic model, not coupled with the ACTN framework. But I just gave example because they derive from the ACTN framework. So there's some example, there's some figure. So we may
So
actually.
it was just an example.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you.
So, Igor Briskin, so VM obviously can be used in many configurations, right? So my understanding is that you see VM as a node which has basically links, open-ended links, right? And it's isn't it the responsibility of what you call T service mapping to assign Cs to VM, right? So if it's so, then it should be decoupled, right? It doesn't have to come as a single thing. You can talk about VM, like for example, like an abstract topology or set of tunnels independently from the users of that.
So let me make sure that I understood your comment correctly. You are saying that it's already there. Like we can do this right now. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I think that the VM as a service doesn't include clients of the service. It's actually the model that maps clients to the service. It could be done at the same time or later, or it could be changed at any time, right? You can take one CE and put another one without any modification of VM, right? So I think it's perfectly legal to think about VM without CEs.
Okay, thank you.
Daniele, so I think the requirement makes sense, but I quite agree, surprised with Igor, because I think the IAP doesn't necessarily imply the CE, in the sense that you can have the AP as a one-to-one mapping with the P node and have a sort of hook with nothing appended to it.
Hi, Italo Busi from Huawei. Just a question, what is the difference between a P2P VM member and why not using a tunnel model? Because I see a little bit, while I understand the VM member between attachment points, I'm trying to understand why not using the tunnel model for P2P.
Do we want to talk about that once again?
No, I'm just trying to understand why. I mean, it's okay. You understand the doubt. We are extending the scope to something which is already there. That's my fear. Thank you.
Should we move to the next? The performance, autonomics. So this one is the recently adopted document. So I'm sure you all would have read it, and it will be fresh in your memory. And what does this model do? If it is not, that we define the performance monitoring telemetry information. So these are the two Yang models which augment the T model and the VN model, and it includes the performance monitoring parameters which you could subscribe to. And apart from that, it also has the scaling information. So most of the changes that we did in the this was to describe the scaling part much more clearly, because I think the performance parameters were pretty clear, but the concept of what is scaling and what do we mean by these terms that we are using, that was not clear. So we worked on improving and adding clarification for that, added a terminology section, etc. And also via examples describe the network autonomics part and what do we mean in the context of this document. There was a comment with respect to what is the right reference for the notification mechanism, the security section, INA section, and all the other Yang style guides and references, etc. Thanks to everyone who commented during the adoption process while we made these good changes to the document. So regarding the terminology, this is something that we kind of put down in our document. The key performance data, that's pretty clear. These are the set of parameters, performance parameters, delay, jitter, things like that we are monitoring on the VL level and T level. We described what is scaling in our document. That is either you are scaling in your resources or scaling out. So within the context of a T tunnel, how your resources can be modified, that's what we mean by scaling. And with the intent, what we meant was put conditions, like while you're monitoring these parameters, you could also put conditions that this condition on that parameter should be met, and at that time I should scale in or scale out. So that's what we meant by the scaling conditions and the intent that we put. So by combining the actual data in the Yang model plus these conditions for scaling in and scaling out, we are meeting the requirements for network autonomics within the limited scope of the TE and the VN model. So that's how is with respect to the terminology. So hopefully this can help clear up some confusion that was there earlier. So this part hasn't changed. We are simply augmenting these models, adding performance parameters, putting the scaling conditions, etc. With respect to scaling, which is the one which we may have to drill down a little bit. Basically, how we are setting the scaling condition, you are mentioning whether you need to scale up, whether this is a scaling out condition or a scaling in, what kind of metric you want to monitor at the time of scaling, what is the value when it reaches that threshold, that's when the condition is hit. And also you have a ability to put multiple conditions, that you can be monitoring multiple parameters. So whether it's an AND condition or condition, min, max, things like that, we could combine multiple performance parameters and threshold values via the scaling operation type. And of course, we wanted to make sure that there are some durations involved, that the threshold must be met for a particular time, and there should be some cool down time before the same conditions get hit again. To solve those problems, we had put these parameters. And this is one example where you are scaling for while monitoring the two-way delay metric with a threshold value of 300 milliseconds and scaling conditions for utilized bandwidth for again some MB. And by combining these two conditions, you are saying that when this particular condition is met, I must scale out in this particular manner. So this is still work in progress. This is the thing that we have. We are open to suggestions on what is the best way to model this. And if there is any suggestions from the group, we are all ears. Thank you.
Igor Briskin. So when the client tries to configure scaling for the tunnel, right? Basically defines conditions, defines thresholds. So according to your model, I assume that you have to take the leaves from the model and configure them properly, right? But what if client has something in mind, like combination of, say, two leaves that you didn't envision, stuff like that. So it would be very awkward. So you would have to go and modify the model. So it means basically what you're trying to do is envision the logic of the client of doing such thing. So what I think the better way to do this is what NetMode guys doing. What, for example, we try to introduce basically some automation based on YARN, which doesn't do it in the form of logic rather than in terms of configurable leaves. Defines the thresholds, defines the combinations of different things that triggers particular event and actions according to this event.
Greg Mirsky, ZT. In our discussion in IPPM working group and with their feedback from those who are using active measurement performance in the field on a network, so what we learn is that min and max are not very useful metrics. Minimum and maximum. Yeah. Mean is a little bit more useful, but what is most useful is a percentile.
Yeah.
And usually they do 3 levels of percentile, 95, 99, and 99.9. And these may be used as thresholds. So once you have a test session, you can determine their percentile of the test session and compare it to the threshold.
Greg, do you have a good reference for that?
Stamp-Yang model. Stamp. It's a working group document, IPPM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to check with the authors of this draft about the TE telemetry model. Generally, this model is augmenting the T-tunnel one, which is a very general and technology-free model. So do we have also the plans to integrate those kind of technology-specific performance monitoring parameters here, or we allow the augmentation for the technology-specific performance monitor parameters?
Right now in T's, of course, we don't, but we hope, like, if there is an interest, we can take some work to CCAMP, which can use this as a base and add any technology specific things onto it. Right now, we don't have anything, but yeah, if there is an interest, we can further talk about it, what we can take to CCAMP.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm Italo Busi from Huawei. I'm presenting the GMPLS signal extension for shared mesh protections on behalf of co-authors. And what is the history of this document? This document has been recently adopted as a working group document at the beginning of this year. And we have just submitted before this IETF a new update where we had tried to address some comments we received during the working group adoption. One of them was clarifying the difference between SMP, share mesh protection, and SMR, share mesh restoration, as already defined in RFC 4872. And another comment we got was about what to do for APS configuration. We have also worked with some new co-authors on how to describe notifications, and we have new co-authors that provided input to this update. So what is the problem we had addressed with notification? What happens is that since the protection path is shared by multiple protecting LSPs, it could happen that the failure on protecting LSP number 2 will make unavailable for protection switching protecting LSP number 1, and we want to notify the end and tail end of this protecting LSP that this path is no longer available, such that it doesn't try to activate this path since the activation will fail. And the solution we found is that maybe the solution could be that the node where that detects that the resources are being unavailable send a path error, a reservation error, with a subcode policy control failure has preempted them, and also it's set the path state remove flag must not set it, because the reason is that we want to notify the tail end that the protection path is not available, but we don't want the LSP to be torn down. And we would like to get, that's the solution we found by our discussion. We were not 100% sure, and we wanted to get feedback from the working group about whether we have resolved the problem. And this is exactly the right behavior to implement, to notify the endpoints not to activate the path, but without tearing down the state. And then when the source become available back again, so the protecting the LSP number 2 is no longer active, you get the APS, and then you go back with pattern reservation. Yes, please.
Tariq, from Juniper. I did not read the draft, but something caught my eye. Why wouldn't you use soft preemption notification? Soft preemption, like resource not available, and that would not tear down the LSP. Maybe we can take it offline.
Okay, yeah. So we were not aware, or was not aware of this option. Okay, yeah, we can think about it. Yeah, the idea is not to tear down and to let the LSPs don't try to activate it with APS. That's the intention. Yeah. Okay, good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, then the second open issue that we are discussing is about the SMP preemption priority. In 80803, the rules are order is that in case of competition between two different protected LSP trying to access the same resource, the first it will be used the SMP preemption priority, and if they have the same preemption priority, it will be the APS priority, and if they have the same APS priority, we will use the LSP identifier to decide which one of the two LSP will access the resource. But after some we try to encode the SMP preemption priority defined in 80803 into GMPLS setup and holding priority, but it looks like they are quite different because GMPLS setup priority and holding priority are related to the activation on the state, so to the setup of the LSP, while the idea is that when the protection LSP is preempted, we want to keep the state as before. So our feeling is that we should not use the GMPLS setup and holding priority, but we should have a new object that carry the SMP preemption priority. And then we have two options. One is to define a new object, or the other option is to define a new field within a protection object. And we don't have any strong opinion about which one of the two we prefer. So we will appreciate any input from the working group on whether you have a preference. I think that the advantage of using the existing object means no new YANA allocation, but may have impact on existing implementation. So we don't have strong opinion, but maybe others may have.
So in the previous version you had, you were using protection object with a...
But as already defined, we had a new flex, yes. The idea here is to add a new field where you configure, and I think is a 3-bit preemption priority value.
So the initial feedback was to use a new C type for protection.
Yeah, yeah. The next comment is about issue is about APS configuration. Here the situation is a little bit difficult. The APS protocol is for further study in 808.3, and the meaning of this is that the protocol itself, which is used in the data plane, the protocol and message format is technology and/or vendor specific. 808.3 is generic, and it means that since there is no generic APS protocol, means that every technology can define its own one. And for example, in OTN, it's basically vendor specific. And we need most of the APS configuration can be done before any LSP setup, so there is no impact on GMPLS. The only issue that may have an impact on the GMPLS is the fact that the APS protocol message, when they request to activate a given protecting LSP, they need to identify the protection LSP. And we think that some implementation may reuse the GMPLS LSP identifiers to identify the LSP, or a sort of hashing key like that. Other implementation may define an APS identifier, and this APS identifier needs to be configured when the LSP is set up. And this has an impact on RSVPT, because that's the time where you assign this identifier. And since this is not discussed in the ITUT data plane, we are evaluating different options for which we have not all the quotas are in agreement, so input from the working group is really appreciated. The one is to say this is out of scope, since it's for further study in 808.3, and let every vendor figure it out what to do. Another option could be to define a new object, and then says the content is vendor specific. A third option could be to define a new object, which is a sort of TLV structure, where you can say some types are allocated for standard track. In case of we have a standard technology specific APS, we can develop, we can say for this specific APS protocol, that's the structure of the TLV, and some other can be, for example, expert review or private allocation for vendor specific APS. So any opinion about what's the best approach? Because we don't have a standard reference for the APS protocol. So we have these three open issues. We will get input, and then we want to resolve this open issue and get further feedbacks and comments.
So Italo, for all the issues you raised, not only the last slide, but the previous one, it seems to me that you're not being consistent with 4872 and 73.
Mm-hmm.
Do you look to see that, to make sure your mechanisms that you're proposing are aligned with those RFCs? In particular, how you notify about errors and faults and do protection switchover?
Yeah, well, for the...
It looks like you're using a different mechanism here.
Yes, the reason is that in the 4872 SMR, the protecting LSP is actually turned down when you have a preemption. And no, that was my understanding. Okay.
No, go look for 1 and 1+1, and
okay.
you'll see that it's using notifies.
Notifies, okay.
And that's particularly important when you don't have to change state in intermediate nodes, and that's why the notify was used. Because then you can directly target that, and you can get a much faster switch over.
So your suggestion is to use notify instead?
No, I'm suggesting let's be consistent with the existing RFC.
Okay, okay,
okay. So, take a look at the 72 and 73.
Okay.
And
73 as well, okay.
Yeah, 4872 and 4873. You reuse the mechanisms there as much as possible.
Okay.
And not saying you're not doing something a little new, that's why we have the draft. But let's make sure we're only doing things that are new, that are really new.
Okay, for the notification, we will review that and try to align that. That's a good suggestion.
And I think that covers.
But for preemption priority, it's a little bit different because, and then I think.
You want to do it in a way that's consistent with the existing RFC.
Yes, and there is nothing about that because the preemption priority for SMR is relying on GMPLS setup priority, but end up with the fact that the LSP is preempted and removed from the control plane. And here what we want is to keep in the control plane and not activate that in the data plane. And so I think
So I think when you go through it, you'll find that I suspect it'll lead you to option 2.
Option 2, okay, new field within protection object. Okay.
Go through it, really look at it from the context of the existing RFC.
Okay.
And see where it leads you.
Okay. And then what about APS configuration? I mean, it's just trying to allow people to add their own objects, basically, if they need to configure. Not everybody needs to really add a new object, because if you rely on the GMPLS LSP identifier to identify your LSP in the data plane, you don't need to configure anything. But some people may implement APS and use a 1 byte ID, and then you cannot get it from.
Yeah, I almost, not sure if our AD is paying attention, but I know she has repeatedly said we have to be very careful not to be standardizing ahead of what the standard body that owns the technology is doing. So I think we have to be a little careful here. And so I'm a little bit worried about the options of 2 and 3 from that context. So I think if we do 2 and 3, we have to make sure that we're well aligned with the IGT on this.
Okay, because at this moment in time, there is no protocol definition in ITTs, vendor specific.
And that's where we've been very careful to not get ahead of the ITUT on a technology that they own.
Okay, so you prefer to keep it out of scope?
I suspect that that's the safest way to proceed.
Okay. Good
Deborah,
feedback.
I don't know if you want to say anything. You can say, nod your head no, and I'll just say you don't have anything you want to.
Deborah, Italo, I haven't been following this one at ITU. Is this really the assumption that it's?
Well, ITUT, the situation is the following. 80803, it doesn't define any APS protocol. The sections is for further study. So there is no generic protocol that applies to every technology. So in a generic GMPLS, we cannot define. We have maybe to go specific. And the only technology that is today defined for SMP is OTN SMP or USMP. And in that case, we don't have any APS protocol defined. We didn't agree on the format. So at the end of the day, everybody is deploying SMP with its own SMP.
Well, I think it would be a good opportunity to liaison ITU, say we're doing this document. It's not working group yet, but we had the requirements. Oh, this is working group. Yeah, so let's liaison and ask the question what their expectations are, because the other is we should maybe do a vendor specific one.
Would you or the authors be willing to draft a liaison for the working group?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Hamian from Huawei, and I'm going to present the interworking between the GMPRS and the centralized controller system. So this work is adopted in last month, and we have brief quick update in July to capture and incorporate some offline feedback from different operators and vendors. So the main change is we also capture the open issue on the list before the working group adoption to enable more interworking scenarios with more explicit text descriptions on different scenarios. So this time we updated by adding more details, mainly on multi-domain scenario, and we are continuously working on adding the multi-layer as well. So let's see what has been changing so far in the last update. So basically, we originally were focused on the kind of GMPRS domain what we have been enabled on among the devices, but now we are also received some feedback saying that this architecture should be general enough to allow the interworking between the non-GMPRS domain and the GMPRS domain. So the red block is something we add to the figure, saying that the architecture, on the perspective of architecture, the system can allow the interworking between the GMPRS and non-GMPRS. But on the scope of this draft, we are still emphasizing the interworking between the controller and the GMPRS domain, which is the right part of this figure. So, and it is also worth noting that a controller is a kind of generic term used in the system, and it can be either the SDN controller or the traditional EMS and MS system. And the difference is mainly about the different protocols used between the controller and the network devices. So, and then we also update the scenarios by providing text on how to do the service provisioning, and especially for the multi-domain cases. And from this page and the next page, we are providing the text to enable both end-to-end service provisioning and also path segment solution. So this page is about the end-to-end scenario, and we have two domains, both enabled in GMPRS protocols, such as we can run the R3PT protocol for signaling. And in this, given this architecture, the normal step for provisioning and set up the RSP is to trigger the provisioning request from the orchestrator to one of the controller by using some existing YANG models and RESTconf protocols specified in IETF, and also then the controller can transfer the kind of configuration to the head-end node, which is usually done by PSAP or not netconf protocol. And then both the controller and the orchestrator are done in their job, and the whole RSP enable would be covered by the head-end nodes, and by using the R3P T protocols to do the signaling work. And this procedure can also be changed a little bit to make an alternative procedure and make best use of the controller, saying that the first step is still the same to trigger the provisioning from the orchestrator to the controller, but the second step is slightly different because both of the controllers in the domain can initiate their respective head-end node to start off the GMPRS signaling. And we also assume that there is GMPRS signaling in the domain, and also we imply that the ERO label is included in the message from the controller to the head-end node. So this is what we have been done so far to make the scenarios descriptions more complete, and we have also have some considerations on provide more detailed about the multi-layer and the protection restoration, and also the controller reliability, which are 3 subsections in the current draft need to be tweaked on the text. And we are also targeting on adding more descriptions on non-GMPRS domain interworking, which may introduce some different issues than the previous version of drafts. That's all the date update. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I may have asked this question before, but I don't remember the response, so I'll ask again.
Yeah.
So this work covers initiating the tunnel setup or the LSP setup from the head end, just like a TCU.
Yep.
Or does it also include transit provisioning? I mean, do you go provision end to end?
Yeah, it can be done end-to-end or segmented.
So I see tunnel segments being provisioned at every domain, but do you also, does this work also include the scenario where you have to go program every hop?
Yes, yes, yes. You can do it from the controller to each hop and just stitch every hop to form an end-to-end RSP. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian?
Shall I talk about?
You're going to have to tell us next.
Oh, this isn't the right one. Okay. Hi, I'm Adrian. Yeah, so that we have a design team for revising RFC 3272, which is the TE architecture framework document that is about 100 years old. Next slide. So we're supposed to be revising it because technology has changed, our understanding of TE has changed and broadened, and recent discussions in a number of working groups in this area have become, I don't know, confused about the term TE. So we worked out that the terms in the document that exists are not adequate for today, and the references are considerably out of date. So we plan to revise it. Next slide. So the chairs gave us a charter to make the update as a full revision, not tweaks, to strengthen the definitions and include new definitions as we needed, and reference ongoing IETF work. So the design team will produce regular updates and reports to the working group. The time interval was not specified. 0 is a regular number. Bye. Yeah.
At least once an IETF,
Yeah.
once per IETF is expected, which is of course why we asked you to present today. So
Right.
thank you for showing up.
We were instructed to report in Prague, which we did, but that was really only as we were setting up, and then produce an initial draft in time for Montreal, which we have not done. Next slide. So what have we actually achieved? Not a huge amount. We met in Prague and decided how we would work and how we would split up the work. And then we converted the current RFC to Cremdown to give us something, a base document to edit. And I did most of that. AC created a GitHub venue for us and put the markdown there. And a few of the teams started to make some changes or whatever magic term you use for doing stuff in GitHub. But then, next slide, we got stuck. I think probably a lot of the responsibility for being stuck is mine. I completely failed to bother to learn what GitHub is. And there's a real lesson there about choosing your tools. It's only worth choosing tools that the people who are going to use the tools will use. I think our team may be sufficiently large that we all know someone else will do the work. We are all busy people, and we just didn't do anything. So no draft, not even close to having a draft ready to post. Next slide. So I present the chairs and maybe the working group with 4 options. Option 1, reboot, which is kick the team that we currently have to do some real work. Option 2 is keep that same team, but use different tools and techniques and hopefully deliver. Option 3, replace some or all of the team, including probably me. And option 4, simply give up on the idea of revising this RFC. Discuss.
Do you have a, do you personally, and does the design team have a preferred option? So you can answer differently or the same or whatever you'd like. And please don't answer, yes, I want to run out of the room.
Let me answer for me, but then I think individuals in the design team should answer individually for them. I think we should try for option 2, because I think that this is work that would benefit the area. On the other hand, I'm not getting the sense that there's a huge, desperate desire to actually do the work, and so option 4 does kind of tickle away. Anyone else design team, you want to say something?
Igor Bruskin. I think it's actually, in my opinion, it's asking too much from design team. The topic is huge. It's, in my opinion, it amounts to like a several volumes of books. So, and basically to do it, you either have to do it real seriously or use option 4.
So I think you just said option 2 or 4 is what should be selected.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody from the design team?
Hi, Tarek with Juniper, part of the design team. I thought there was enough changes to review, at least so that we can publish it in 0.0 draft. Partly take the blame myself as well, because part of the design team, but I think we can deliver a 0.0 version. So I'm leaning to 2 or 1.
Julien Meric, pleading guilty as well in non-contributing efficiently. As far as I've understood, option 3 looks quite pointless because you need to find replacing people, or if the first set of people failed to take the time, I'm afraid option 3 will lead clearly quite fast to option 4. So for me, between 1 and 2, it's up to the leader. But I agree we deserve a second chance to try one or 2 first.
I'm sorry, I missed the very last sentence.
I'd vote for trying 1 or 2 before anything else.
As chairs, obviously, and Pavan will jump in and correct me if I got this wrong. Obviously, we'd like to see the work progress. We chartered the design team for a reason. We don't really care what tooling the group uses. So whatever helps the group be most productive is the group's call. I guess I'm not leaning into the mic enough. Sorry. I was saying whichever tools the team wants to use is their call. So for me, option 1 and 2, I'm not sure the difference between reboot and rebirth if you get to choose your tooling.
Well, that is the difference, yes. So the difference between 1 and 2 is, if you like, an internal thing for the team.
Yeah, I think the difference is internal. From my standpoint, that's a team decision. Whatever works for you guys.
So I guess I'm going to need some doggy treats and a little training.
In other words, we'll proceed with the union of option 1 and 2 at the discretion of the design team, which will continue to be led by you, which and you'll have to tell us offline what form of doggy treats you'd like.
Yeah, doggy treats that we can handle. I need somebody young enough to know what GitHub is and patient enough to teach me.
I could probably help you with that.
You're not young.
I don't have as gray a beard as you, okay? Thank you. We have 6 minutes, and we have the next, Daniela, you're up next. I guess we can get cookies early, and maybe come back no, we can't start the session early. Do you want to start going, Daniela? Do you want to squeeze into 7 minutes, or do you want to wait until after?
If we go long and we have no cookies, we'll still do that.
Yours, of course. Okay, we're gonna start. We're gonna break early. We will have to start on time because there are people who may come in remote. Thank you. Hurry. Yeah.
Blue sheets.
Jeff?